Hello, everyone. It's Duffy, and it's Friday, February 14th, 2020. And I want to say happy Valentine's Day. I love you all, and we are sharing some Do Love today with a very special guest that we have. I've known her for quite some time, met her over Facebook, but what I remember most is sitting next to this guest in Tanya Lanthier's presentation Under One Roof this past summer. And her vibe is fabulous. She's just got a great heart. She's loved by so many, and I can see why. And she was at our retreat, and so we thought, well, let's talk a little bit about her strengths because she's really into it. I think it really changed her life. And I hope that you will help me welcome Miss Stephanie Baker. Yay. Hi, Stephanie. I hope you can hear me, and I hope you're on.
I can hear you just fine.
Yay.
Thank you so much for having me. I just feel blessed to be here, really, truly.
I love it. I love it. Well, I've got my red earrings, and you've got your red sweater on. So we're ready to go. I got my little heart scarf. So Stephanie, tell us a little bit about what your journey was getting to where we are today. Just a capsule of how you became a DeW.
How did I become a DeW? Well, the simple short version is that I became a DeW just by discovering DeW through Facebook. And I noticed that the vibe, for lack of a way of saying it, of all the people who were involved with DeW were the kind of people that I wanted to align myself with. So there was that energy and that excitement and all that stuff that I think that a DeW represents that was just the magnet that drew me toward it more. And of course, I inquired more and more about it, and here I am.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, your background in dentistry. What is your background, Stephanie?
So I am a hygienist of 23 years, and so I've worked in every aspect of dentistry. I actually originally, right out of high school, got hired as a front desk person, then started getting pulled in the back to do some assisting. And of course, as you know, all things dentistry, then you get bit by the bug. And so then I took a couple years off to have kids and that kind of stuff. But then I started going back to school to be a hygienist, and then worked clinical for all those years. And then slowly I just felt like I wanted more of a challenge. So I felt the call to leave clinical dentistry. I was dabbling in all kinds of things, and I was unofficially doing kind of some practice consulting for doctors that I was working with who kept calling me, who just because of professional respect and they wanted my input and they valued it, I just kind of fell into a little bit of that role. And then a few years ago, Elijah Desmond, everybody knows and loves Elijah, reached out to me, and he brought me on to Driven Dental. So I was able to utilize some of those skills in that capacity, and which was all about, having good, strong relationships with doctors and building a trust, helping them grow aspects of their business. And then I recently made a change now, and now I'm working more on my own consulting and dabbling in some other projects. So it's fun and exciting where life seems to take you if you're willing to listen.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And it's such a great profession because you're the perfect example of the different avenues and paths that you can take within the dental career. And I love that someone like you, so smart and has so many talents, is actually staying in the career, loving it, and continuing to give back. It just resonates with me because I always say DeWs never retire. And if those of you that are maybe not familiar with DeW and DeW Life, it's Dental Entrepreneur Women, but it's about women first, dental second. And I think Stephanie and I both would agree that all women are entrepreneurial, right? Because we're all spinning many plates. And so I think that we have that innate talent to be able to do that. And therefore, so much that we can give back to the community.
Well, I think you touched on a big point, is that there are so many opportunities available to people in dentistry. And I, very much like a lot of people that I encounter, for many years, I was under the notion that there wasn't like once a hygienist and that's it. You were just stuck. You're always going to be a hygienist. And I think some of that is just falling prey to some crazy myth that we convince ourselves of. But I think the other thing that it speaks to is that we undervalue, and I certainly did, I undervalued the consulting, for example, that I was already doing in the practice, because I was like, I'm just helping out a friend. The doctor's I've always been blessed to have great relationships with my bosses. I've always been blessed to work for great bosses who valued me. So I just undervalued that that they respected my opinion, and that I had good thoughts and skills to bring. And I hope that the other DEWs who maybe are not as far along in their thought process for exploring other things will consider that and take a step back and say, I really do have a lot of skills that are beyond just scraping plaque. There's a lot of value.
Exactly. And I think the cool thing is, and it takes a little bit of time, doesn't it? You've got to have a little, work behind you, relationships behind you. And that kind of brings me to the point of this Be Live, is I wanted to talk a little bit about what we did at our retreat in November that everybody absolutely loved. I wanted to bring living your strengths to the dental arena, because I had delved into that about maybe 10 years ago, and it changed my life. And you were one of the special people at the retreat that it seemed to resonate with you. And I think on Valentine's Day, it's so perfect, because the goal for me was for you and everyone there, and everybody in the, we're going to keep spreading this, right? To fall in love with yourself. And how perfect is that, to have this Be Live today on Valentine's Day?
When it's perfect.
Love ourselves. It's about loving yourselves, and we can love others so much more. And I think that's really at the core of, what makes the world a better place, right?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. But I think the other point that you just touched on that's so important is the loving yourself part. I don't know if you're not far enough along in that journey with discovering yourself and learning how to love and appreciate who you are and all that you bring to the table, the good, the bad, and maybe the not so perfect parts that we are as a person, and embracing those. I think once you do that, you're more receptive to receive these traits. And as I shared with you when we spoke, in fact, one of my God-given qualities, my traits, is that I'm an achiever. And so one of the things that was so enlightening for me at the retreat, because I'm an achiever, I would I'm very raw and honest with myself on the things that I'm strong in, but also in my deficiencies. So I would just go after and attack those things that I felt like I was weak in.
Yes.
Because that's my nature. And so what the retreat was so invaluable in passing along to me was, instead of working so hard and putting so much of my energy into being what I'm not, what I don't have, cultivate and just celebrate the things that you are. And so I don't know why, but at that retreat, that was like a total aha light bulb moment for me. I was so worried about bringing up these areas in me that were deficient in my mind. And I will always be a work in progress, right? We all are.
Oh, yes.
But I recognize that I was not taking the time to celebrate all that I am. And then one of my top strength is connectedness. And so what I discovered, although I never really realized it had that name, I just knew I was great at bringing people together. And I would say that all the time. In fact, it's funny, my daughter often says to me, even when her own friends get in crises, life crises, need help talking through a situation, she'll call me and say, Mom, I either help me know what to say, or will you talk to so-and-so and help them through? And so, I don't know, several months back, like last summer or something, we were talking, and I said, she made me laugh. And I said, you always do this to me. And she said, Mom, that's because you're everybody's hype girl. And I said, what? And so now it's become a joke in our family. She's like, you're everybody's hype girl. Like you make everyone believe that they can. And so they can, whatever comes after the can, whatever it is that they want to do, if they're on the fence. And it was not, and so I always knew that that was a strength of mine. But when I went to the retreat and it had a name,
Yeah.
connectedness, I don't know why, but that resonated so strongly with me. And I was like, so now all the time as I interact with people and clients and even my own family and friends, I'll say, well, you know, that's what I do. I'm all about connecting people. I'm about connectedness. So it was a lot about, the retreat was a lot about just raw self-discovery. And I appreciate the platform that you created in the retreat, that we all felt safe enough to be vulnerable with ourselves and with each other. And but it was identifying it, and it's something about just knowing this is my identity and this is who I am, and undisputably this is who I was created to be. Then it's like I marched out of there, so to speak, with like this new head back, confidence, shoulders back, like, doggone it, this is who I am, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
be it to the max.
Yeah, you walked out, you said, you know, I'm good at this. Instead of like saying, oh, I don't know why you think that I should be doing this, you can actually own it, right?
Yes.
And connectedness is so much more, Stephanie. It is connecting people, but the reason I think the young people gravitate to you, like you're like, hey, help me out to figure this out, because you can show them there's a reason that they're in this spot, and there's a goodness ahead of them. And so
Yes.
you can connect the dots between the past, the present, and the future, and you can give them a little bit of a glimmer onto what's in front of them with more hope. And then your developer. So I want to go over your top 5. So number 1, connectedness.
Yes.
And I want to read this little thing. I'm going to read a little thing so people can get an idea of what we're just a little snippet that I took out. People who are especially talented in connectedness theme have faith in the links between all things. And you have a very spiritual side too.
I do.
And you've owned that. But now,
Mhm.
we think about God-given talents. I mean, whoever gave them to you, we were given these in the womb. You were meant for this, right? And it also says they believe there are very few coincidences, and that almost every event has a reason. So when someone is struggling, you can say, hey, I know you're struggling now, but this is why.
Yes.
And then you can bring them forward. And I think that is just so beautiful. And so now, looking for opportunities, right? It's like, hey,
Exactly.
I can help you with this. And it's going to help your offices. What a fabulous, I was looking at all these traits, and, fabulous traits for being a consultant, and really helping, not just your daughter's friends, but everybody that you come in contact with. And I've noticed that, because since the retreat, I've had so many women come to me and say, oh, I met Stephanie Baker and I just love her, and we've kept in touch. So you don't only connect, you have such a deep relationship with people right off the bat, that they just want a little bit more of you. And then you want more of them. I love that. And
I love people, but I often say people like me, you have those upfront people like yourself who are just, the beautiful face that we come to know with DeW. But I say, like, you think of like when you're in high school or whatever, like the cheerleaders, how they would make the pyramids.
Yeah.
Like I'm like your bottom rung of your pyramid. And when you read all these traits, which was extreme, when they were reading the traits and the characteristics behind and the explanations behind each one of the traits, I was just sitting there like, it felt like they were like reading my mail. I felt like someone was right over my shoulder reading my DNA. And I was like, oh my word, if this is not me, I do not know what is. But I am your bottom rung of the pyramid. Like, I'm your worker bee. I don't need to be in front of everybody, but that connectivity, that connection between the person that's beside me in the base of the pyramid and the person that's above me, that I'm holding up on the pyramid, is so huge to me. And I do believe wholeheartedly we're all connected somehow. And so this just supports the traits just support all that I am.
Well, of course they do, because again, then you got number two, the achiever in you. So of course you've got to be the best on the bottom rung that you could possibly be, right? I mean, you're constantly achieving, checking things off, and then discipline. You wouldn't dare not show up for the event, right? Or to that people can count on you, and then you have that. I'm sure the structure of your day probably lends itself to that. And that's probably why what Elijah saw in you also. I see you as a true leader among dues. And I think it does take some discipline. And then number four, responsibility. So you take that on if someone's given you a task, right? That's very serious to you. And it's a lovely thing that people can always count on you. These are just beautiful. And then the development.
In fact, if I may interrupt, in fact, it was kind of funny because my husband often teases me and he'll say, you have like an overwhelming sense of responsibility. It's like beyond, it's like freakishly normal. And that was when they read at the retreat and they read the specifics of that trait. And it said that, and I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like an overwhelmingly disproportionate, sense of obligation to being responsible. And so I called my husband that night and I said, you are never going to, and I took a screenshot of like on the papers that you guys hand out. And he was like, if that's not you, I don't know what it is.
Oh my God.
I run a toll, if I go through a toll and the little light goes off, I'm like, I'm convinced that the police are going to come get me and no one else. And that he's always like, you're so responsible.
Oh my gosh. I love it. It's so fun. And that is another fun thing is when they see it in you and then they could actually, and then you could, like just chat about it. And it makes even your husband accept that part of you when it can be a little bit irritating because, I'm sure sometimes he probably thinks you're a little overly responsible because you said you were going to do it. You're going to do it, whether the whole house falls apart. This is what you set out to do, right?
Right.
So now he's going to have to understand that. I'm sorry, dear. That's just one of my many talents. And
he really has accepted and owned that. It has given him a new sense of understanding that this is why I do the things that I do. And because two more, as you can imagine, as a lot of relationships are, two more opposite humans there could probably never be. I mean, we're just like opposite ends of the spectrum. And he always jokes and says that I've built a small city before he ever gets out of bed in the morning. I'm just like, go, 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 go. But after coming home from the retreat, I had a fire lit under me. And so I came home and I was like, read this and read this. And he was like, wow, that is so you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And it's just so refreshing to be able to just they say in this whole thing. And I think going through just getting your strengths isn't enough, right? I mean, you really have to go through this because a few people had gotten their strengths and they just put them in a drawer. They're like, oh, I don't know. But when we do this research on it, when we do this chatting about it and talking to your husband and your daughter and your friends, and they really see that in you, it's so much easier to live each day when it's easier, because living your strengths is living in a way that feels good, feels easy, feels natural, versus always trying to we have strengths envy. I would love to be more of a strategic person. And so that's why I loved when I found out Rebecca's number one strength was strategic. I'm like, yes, because what I do, she can't do, but what she does, I can't do, right? And so that's kind of cool that your husband and you are opposite, because together, when you understand each other and love each other,
right,
it's a good thing. And also the appreciation is really important, isn't it? I mean, because
100%.
I'm not going to lie. I have tried to change my husband and a few of his traits, but you know what? He is who he is. And especially on Valentine's Day, I celebrate him for all the good, wonderful things that he's brought to my life. And I love it. Well, talk a little bit more about developer, because that's really key to what you're doing with your work.
Yes. And that's probably of my 5 strengths. That's the one that I am just beginning to like own the most and appreciate the most. And that is everything about not only developing new things within your world, but new things within yourself, and being open to that, and the ownership of that. And so that's kind of where I found myself, is with this most recent venture that I'm jumping into, is that, interestingly, I had gotten, because back to the little analogy that I gave, I have become so comfortable with being that base, that bottom of the pyramid, so to speak. I'm your girl that's the support. And that in some of these roles, sometimes it's kind of like, you get shifted around a little bit, and then you're up here for a little bit, but then you go back here, and then you might go back up to the top. And, like some of these games we used to play as a kid. And so I had become so comfortable being on the bottom rung that when I would find myself, getting jostled around and jockeyed into a new position, I'd be like, okay, this isn't really comfortable. So I need to go back down to the bottom, because that's my comfort space. That's where I live. And so the retreat has been instrumental in helping me own that it's okay to embrace that. Along with these, there are changes that have come, and that these are not the end all of who we are. We do have all 32.
Yes.
We have the whole package. These are just our strengths where we live. So I'm getting more comfortable with the developer part. And mostly I tend to be one of those that I have to be thrust into a situation, as some of my friends can, because I'm like, my brother and I often say, my brother is the hare and I'm the tortoise. He'll try anything new, and I'm just your slow and steady girl. But life has just forced me, and it's beyond my control now. I have to take notice that it's time for me. Sometimes I have to take on the role of the tortoise. Of the hare a little bit.
Right.
And jump out of my comfort zone and hop around and skip about and do something that seems a little crazy in the moment. And then I can go back to being my bottom rung of the pyramid. So, and that developer part that's the part of all this from the retreat that is being stretched the most. I'm doing writing and things like that I always thought about, but I never really put legs on it.
Yeah.
And so something by owning that at the retreat said, you know what? And I had things that I had written down for years. And then, but we kind of keep them to ourselves, and we collect up this little, collection of things. And I don't know what in the world I thought I was ever going to do with them. And so it's a lot of things like that, and developing processes. I have a doctor that reached out to me very recently and said, I would like you to please help my team with some things. And I said, okay. And he said, do you have some resources that could facilitate us in that? And I said, and my first reaction was no. But that, because I'm owning the developer side of who I am, I said, yes, I do. I said, let's talk about what your issues are, because in my heart, I thought, I will create this. I will. So some of it is some of the great stuff that like Hazel talked about, and Jasmine talked about, Minal talked about sometimes you're in that moment and you just have to step into the light, like when it's your time. It's like being on like American Idol or something. When your time and the spotlight's on you, you just have to step out there and trust that when you take that step, then the pieces will start falling into place. And so that's what I started owning more instead of suppressing from the retreat. And it's miraculous in that I took that first step. And just as they talked about in the retreat, and just as I believe as being a person of faith, I just guess I wasn't really acting in the capacity that I thought I was. And that is just trusting that when you take the first step, the next step will be laid out in front of you. And since I am that kind of achiever, disciplined person, I'm the type of person that, you need to lay out the whole roadmap for me. That's the way my brain works. Well, sometimes life doesn't give us a whole roadmap. So that's my word for the year, actually, is trust. Every year I take a word and I make it my own for that year. And so in my own personal time, my personal devotion, like in the last couple months since the retreat, but the last couple months leading up to the beginning of 2020, I just kept feeling this sense of trust, trust, trust. So that's everything about the developer part that I'm cultivating in myself, is that today I get up and I'm going to take this step, and I'm going to trust when I take the step that even though I can't see the whole road that's laid out before me, that tomorrow, when it's time for me to take another step, I'm going to trust that when I get up tomorrow, the next step will be there. And I will, and so far, here we are on Valentine's Day, February 14th, every day, the right step has been laid out before me. So I'm
Oh,
living my trust. I'm living the developer part right before
oh,
you.
that's beautiful, Stephanie. That is beautiful. And I can't wait to follow you on this journey because you are so special, and you're just been made to do this. And I think if we're not afraid, well, if we're not afraid every day a little bit, we're not a dental entrepreneur woman. That's for sure, because that we are those people that really want more, want to give more, want to do more, and we're never going to retire. And so it's wonderful to be in your spot. I'm so thankful that you shared this. I wanted to go tell you one little thing, because you and I talked about this. I think it was the other day on the phone, and I wanted to bring this to you. I found it. It says research has shown that there are only 1 in
Yeah.
270,000 chances that someone has the same top 5 as you. And as I recall, we looked at all this. Nobody had the same top 5 in that whole room of women, which was, and there was a lot of achievers in there. Don't get me wrong, a lot of activators, but that's an interesting fact. And there is 1 in 33 million chance that someone would have your top 5 in the same order.
You found that statistic.
I
I was
found
looking
that.
for it.
I know. I couldn't believe it. And 33 million. So God is pretty amazing. He makes every one of us unique. And when we know what our talents are, we want to use them every day and build on those talents. And I just love that you're continuing to study those, to read about those. I love, again, your video that you put your strengths in your bathroom where you're getting your makeup on. They say you should read the strengths, and I think, I hope I sent everybody the genius of your strengths. If I haven't, I need to be doing that. Part of your homework is to read that, for 30 days in a row. But I can tell you own them now. You
I
own
do.
them.
I do. And I look at them every day. And of course, every day I say out loud it, because I truly believe there's power in the spoken word. So I say out loud, it doesn't matter what your belief system is, but for me, I just say, thank you, God, that you created me to be a connector of people and a connector of all things and an achiever. And I just say them right down the list. And then I always immediately say, help me to operate in those gifts to the best of my capacity today. Help me honor you in what you created me to be within these strengths. And so I'm telling you, it has been absolutely revolutionary. And I already had a business. And the name of my business is Volume 52. And there's a reason behind that. And I love people's stories. That's where the name of that came from.
Oh.
And I would do like a book, Volume 52. Well, it was actually something else, but I recently changed it to Volume 52 because of the retreat. And let me explain.
Yes.
It had another name with volume in it. But I changed it to Volume 52 because I am 52 years old. And so my story is being rewritten or added to at 52 years old. I had the business because I sing professionally. So and I do speaking and then the consulting. So I kind of ran everything underneath this whole banner of this business because the volume speaks to my singing abilities. The volume is, applicable in speaking. And then the stories part of, everyone has a story. Every practice has a story.
Yes.
Every human has a story. And I'm fascinated by people's stories. In fact, I've considered, starting a podcast or something like that just to tell people's stories. And I love everyone's story, but I love the common person's story. Everybody knows celebrity stories, but
Yes.
there's so many everyday heroes in dentistry and out that I'm ever astounded when I hear people say, because like, for instance, a couple of the people that I met at DeW and just continued on a relationship, we come to these things and we're in our best, we're the hair is done, the makeup's done, we look all cute, and
Yeah.
we come there all polished, and then you get to talking with someone over a cup of coffee or something, and then you hear what they've been through. It's like all of a sudden, I thought you were pretty great to begin with, but when I hear your story, I just go, I'm astounded by the substance that people have and where they came from, and especially women. Like another word that always amazes me about women is resilience.
Yeah.
Women are so resilient. What the things that people tell me that they come from, and then what they are today. And sometimes it's not that long ago. Sometimes it's just, oh, I just went through this a year ago, 2 years ago, or this whole life changing, like flipped upside down, cancer, husband left me, blah, blah, blah. It was 5 years ago. And I just think, you are like a creature of beauty and strength. I would never see
Yeah.
that when I see you. So I love people's stories. And so that's what I'm doing now more is, I've reactivated my business, brought it back to life. And, and now I'm encompassing every aspect of what I'm doing within that volume 52. But the name change came from the retreat.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You're not only living your strengths, you're living my dream.
I'm like your soapbox
You are like,
evangelist about this.
this is my dream for this to be happening. So I'm just going to say thank you so much for sharing you with all of us today. We'll probably develop this into a podcast. I think that's what we're going to be doing also. And you should do a podcast because you've got a beautiful voice, and we need to hear more of you in every way. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, Stephanie Baker. I look forward to seeing how your new business starts to evolve, continuing working with people and using all of your strengths to impact the world. So we love you.
You bless me so much. You're so precious. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And everybody have a happy Valentine's Day. We love you all, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.